I never thought I'd find myself in a place like that, a wedding decorated with money status and fake handshakes. They sat me in the very last row. No one greeted me. No one even looked my way. I thought, at the very least, my son would turn around. But when the photographer called for the groom's family, I stood up just one step, and Abigail pulled her husband's arm. She's an embarrassment to our family. Don't let her be in the photos. I froze. I didn't respond. Then Abigail's mother, Lorraine, gave a faint laugh and said loud enough for others to hear, "She shouldn't even be here. We only invited her out of politeness." I don't quite remember how I walked up to the speech table. All eyes followed me, not out of affection but out of anticipation. They wanted to see what I would do. I placed the gift box on the table, my hand trembling slightly, but I never took my eyes off my son. Then I pulled out a sealed cream envelope, held it up at chest level, and said, "If one more person dares insult me, I will open this and read it, right here." I wasn't bluffing, I just knew they didn't know what was inside, and it was enough to destroy everything they were trying so hard to put on display that day. I wasn't born into luxury, and I've never needed it. I served as an Army nurse for 14 years, stationed with field units where life hung by a thread, and loyalty was all that remained when everything else fell apart. After the war, I opened a small clinic in Roxbury, a place where people no one remembered could still receive care with dignity. My husband died when Ethan was only 9. I didn't have much, but Ethan had everything he needed: safety, love, and truth. He was bright, kind, and smart, and I had this naive belief that if I raised him right, he would never lose his way. Then he met Abigail. The first time Abigail came to my home was during Christmas of Ethan's senior year in college. Straight hair, a cream turtleneck sweater, a voice as soft as mist, and eyes that scanned the room like she was grading everything by a scale I was never given. I made our family's traditional rose, the one Ethan always requested every year, but Abigail took one bite and suggested, "Maybe next year try something organic." I didn't hate her. I just knew I didn't belong in that world. They got married at a resort in Vermont. I contributed a small portion to the cost, even though no one asked me to. And I chose a very special wedding gift, a necklace passed down from my mother-in-law, a woman who gave it to me with the words, "Give this only to someone you truly trust." I gave it to Abigail. She smiled and said thank you. But to this day, I've never once seen her wear it. Their new apartment in Beacon Hill, elegant, cold, and staged like a showroom. The main wall is filled with wedding photos, diplomas, travel pictures, but not a single photo includes me. I once brought an old family picture, a photo of me and Ethan at Cape Cod sand on our hands and ice cream melting down our sleeves. I framed it in silver and placed it on the living room shelf. The next time I visited, it had been turned face down, not broken, not removed, just flipped over, as if it was still allowed to be there, just not allowed to be seen. I didn't ask, because if I had to ask, I already knew the answer. Lorraine Abigail's mother never said anything to my face, but her glances said enough. She was once the head of a prestigious PTA, well-connected, wealthy. I'd heard whispers she had steered her daughter's trust fund into real estate investments with her relatives. Ethan once said she helped arrange the financial paperwork for their marriage. I didn't interfere. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, maybe they'd eventually look at me with respect. But the truth is, some circles you were never meant to belong to. And if you weren't part of it from the start, you'll never be truly invited in. I still visited Mason, my only grandson, whenever I was allowed. Abigail always controlled the schedule, the phone calls, even the gifts. Once I gave him a vintage storybook. She quickly replaced it with an iPad filled with logic development reading apps. I said it didn't matter, but that night Mason leaned in and whispered in my ear, "Grandma, I miss the smell of your old books." No one saw how I raised my son. No one needed to know how many times I stood at the edge of life and death just to save a child I didn't even know. But one thing they were certain of, I didn't belong in their picture-perfect family. And today, at this wedding, they're about to find out I don't need anyone's permission to stand up. Mason's 10th birthday party was held at Ethan and Abigail's house, the same house I once helped them buy their first down payment for before they moved in. The whole event looked like something out of a picture-perfect family movie: a three-tiered cake, a private DJ, pastel balloons floating in midair, and a professional photographer capturing every special moment. I arrived right on time, carrying a small gift box, a wooden ship model I had handcrafted over 6 weeks. It had no monetary value, but every plank had been sanded by hand, every sail stitched with care. I knew Mason loved the ocean and liked to imagine distant adventures. After dinner, people started making speeches. Lorraine went first, then a cousin from Abigail's side, then an uncle of hers. Each raised their glass to toast the grandparents who made such a wonderful generation possible. I waited, but no one mentioned me, not even once. Not the name Amelie, not even just Grandma, not in any of their well-rehearsed thank you speeches. I stayed seated, trying my best to smile. After the cake was cut, Mason came running over and hugged me. He whispered, "Grandma, where's your gift?" I pointed to the gift table, but my box had been moved to a corner in the kitchen under a few empty gift bags. It was clear someone had moved it, quickly, on purpose. I didn't say anything. I just told him, "I'll bring you the treasure map tomorrow." He grinned wide and ran off to show his friends. But just as I was about to leave, something small made me pause. I overheard Abigail speaking to Mason. "Don't call her Grandma. Just say Amelie. It's less confusing." I stood behind the kitchen door, each word landing like a stone. Then Ethan's voice chimed in soft, awkward, "They just mean to keep things consistent, so the kids don't get confused." Was it the kids who were confused or the adults desperately trying to erase me from the family? I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just said goodbye politely and left. But my heart was unsettled. That night, I came back to pick up a bag. I had forgotten a new pair of reading glasses. The house was still lit. The cleaning lady was tidying up. The door was unlocked. I knocked gently and stepped in, intending to grab my things and go. But as I passed the hallway, my eyes caught the security monitor near the entrance. Footage was playing a clip from earlier that morning. I saw Lorraine in the living room speaking to the housekeeper. She pointed out a photo of me and Mason hanging in the corner of the room. Her voice lowered. "That one, take it down. It doesn't match the tone of the party. It doesn't match the tone." A photo of a grandmother and her grandchild discarded because I didn't fit their aesthetic. The housekeeper hesitated, but then she took it down. I watched the clip for another 10 seconds, said nothing. Then I picked up my glasses and walked to the door, but this time I didn't close it gently. I shut it hard, loud enough to echo down the hallway. For the first time, I realized I wasn't forgotten. I was being erased, deliberately, strategically. I didn't know how far they'd go to cut me out. But I knew one thing: I was still here, and I wouldn't let anyone rewrite my place in this family behind my back. I knew I was no longer part of that family on the very day I received the Thanksgiving invitation email. Not because of what it said, but because of how it was sent. A long list of familiar names, mostly Abigail's friends and relatives. Even the housekeeper got it first. I was at the very bottom, tucked into the CC field like a footnote, as if I only needed to know to avoid being offended. And still I went. I've never missed a family gathering. Even when they forgot me, I showed up. Not for them, for Mason, because a child deserves to know his grandmother is there. No conditions, no negotiation. I brought my cranberry glazed roast chicken, Ethan's favorite, the one he used to beg for every year. When I arrived, the tables had already been arranged, 4 large ones inside beneath chandeliers and scented candles. The 5th table was out on the patio next to a few wilted potted plants. On it was a name card, typed, clear, no mistake. It said Amelie. I walked into the house carrying the tray of food. No one came to greet me. Lorraine sat at the center of the room telling stories about her trip to Italy. Abigail was double-checking the menu. Ethan stood next to her, but didn't see me. No one asked where I wanted to sit. No one cared if I was cold. So I returned to my table, sat down, tried to eat slowly, quietly. I wasn't hungry. But I didn't skip the meal because I had taught my son that no matter what you eat, even if no one invites you, the dinner went exactly how you'd expect from people obsessed with appearances. They smiled just enough, complimented just enough, and reminded one another to keep the mood positive. No one mentioned me, My name didn't come up, not in any toast, not in any family story, not in any shared memory. Lorraine was thanked for being the spiritual pillar of the entire family. Ethan smiled. Mason was praised as a gifted child thanks to the incredible parenting of his mother, father, and grandmother. I had been erased from the equation. No discussion, no announcement. They had simply rewritten the family story without me in it. After dinner, I went into the kitchen to find Mason. He was reading the coloring book I'd given him. I handed him a small fabric-covered notebook. Inside were 30 questions about what he learned each day. I had used it before to help children process trauma. I didn't explain. I just placed it in his hands and said, write one answer each day, one sentence at a time. You'll understand yourself better than anyone. Mason hugged me like he always did. But this time, I didn't feel comforted. I felt angry. I had been silent for too long. When I returned to the table, I heard Abigail telling a guest, I always have to stop her war stories and poverty tales. They don't fit the happy vibe. She didn't mean for me to hear that, but I did, loud and clear, as if she wasn't afraid I'd react, as if I had become nothing more than a piece of background, silent, outdated, and invisible. I didn't walk over to confront her. I didn't expose her on the spot. But in my mind, one thought rang crystal clear. If no one gives me the place I deserve, I will take it myself. I stood up, left the slice of cake untouched, didn't say goodbye, didn't need anyone to stop me. And that night, I didn't cry. I opened the invitation email again, scrolled down to my name in the CC line, and deleted it. Not to forget, but to remember. To remember the exact moment I was written out of my own family without a single word. I discovered the full truth on what should have been an ordinary morning. I had gone to the notary office to finalize the transfer of part of the funds from selling the ancestral home money I had planned for a medical scholarship I'd dreamed about for 3 years. A scholarship named after my late husband, a man who believed, if you live with kindness, kindness will live on. But the clerk looked at me with a worried expression. I'm sorry, ma'am. This property is no longer listed under your name. I thought she had made a mistake. I handed her the original paperwork. She double-checked, then printed out the updated record. New owners, Ethan and Abigail. I saw a signature with my name. I recognized my handwriting. And it wasn't mine. I didn't demand an explanation. I didn't make a scene. I simply stood up, thanked her, and walked out. My hands were ice cold, but my head burned as if someone had slapped me. I called Ethan. His voice was calm like nothing had happened. I asked, why is the house under your name? Since when? And who signed my name? Ethan paused. Then in the tone you'd use for a nervous child said, you don't really need it, Mom. It's all going to the family eventually. Lorraine helped speed things up with the paperwork. You always said you trusted me. I said nothing, not because I was weak, because I was trying not to scream through the phone. Lorraine, of course, the same woman who managed her daughter's finances, always in a blazer, always holding an iPad, always speaking in the language of success. I had let too many things slide, thinking that as long as my son was at peace, I could let it go. But this time, they had taken the last thing I still had my right to decide. I went home, sat down, opened every folder, every backup copy. I rechecked dates, transaction forms, signatures. I began to see gaps, inconsistencies, ink that didn't match. I hired an attorney. Not to win the house back, it's just one brick in the wall of my life. What I wanted was the truth, and I wanted someone to be held accountable. My lawyer, a young woman named Nicole, looked up after reviewing the documents and said a line I'll never forget. Do you really think this is the first time they've done something like this? Nicole unearthed buried files. Turns out Lorraine had once been sued by her ex-husband for asset manipulation, selling their joint home without his consent. The lawsuit disappeared after a private settlement. No one ever spoke of it again, but the paper trail was still there if you cared to look. I'd forgiven plenty before being ignored, sidelined, dismissed. I thought I'd grown used to being forgotten. But this wasn't forgetting. This was theft. No one, not even your own child, has the right to do that. Family ties don't excuse wrongdoing. Convenience doesn't justify forgery. So I started gathering evidence openly this time. I wanted them to know exactly what I was doing. I filed a formal request to authenticate every document, emailed it directly to Ethan, and CC'd my attorney. I did not back down. They used my forged signature to push me out. I'd use that same signature to drag them into the light. From here on, this wasn't a family matter. It was about truth, about honor, about a mother's right to speak when she's given everything except permission to do what's right. I didn't walk into the law office as someone's mom. I walked in as a woman whose name had been stolen, ready to reclaim every letter. My old attorney, Mr. Harris, now semi-retired, still takes cases he deems worth fighting for. After reading my file, he raised an eyebrow and said, "This isn't a property dispute. It's an abuse of power." I nodded, and I will not stay silent. We filed a complaint to overturn the illegal transfer of the ancestral house, and I didn't stop there. I rewrote my will line by line. It was no longer a polite piece of paper for the next generation. It became my final declaration, not just as a mother, but as a citizen. Part of my estate, including the house proceeds, goes to a nonprofit that funds medical scholarships for underprivileged students. The rest, I left to the last person they'd ever expect, Ava, the housekeeper. Ava is 22, hardworking, quiet, and she calls me Mrs. Amelie, not with words, but with eyes full of respect. When everyone else ignored me, she was the only one who brewed me tea without being asked. One evening while I was sorting documents, Ava came in. Her hand trembled as she held out a flash drive. "I think you should have this," she said. I plugged it in. It was an audio recording, Lorraine's cold voice crystal clear. "I need you to remove that photo and shred the notice saying Amelie hasn't signed. If anyone asks, say I handled it to save time." There was also an original email from Lorraine to Abigail, subject line, "Paperwork done. Easier if it stays in mother's name." In that moment, I realized I didn't have to imagine anymore. I had proof. Ava agreed to testify. She'd planned to stay quiet, afraid of losing her job, but after watching me night after night calmly organizing files, never crying, she said, "You deserve to hear your name spoken with respect." I smiled not out of happiness, but because for the first time in years I wasn't alone. I chose my battleground, Mason's wedding. Not for revenge, but because it would be the one occasion where everyone, Lorraine, Abigail, Ethan, relatives, friends, would be present. If they intended to stage a perfect family play, I would rewrite the ending. I slipped the cream envelope into my purse, told no one, gave no warning. If they crossed the line one more time, I'd open it right there in front of the microphone, right there in the middle of the crowd. Unafraid, that ancestral home was where I wiped blood from a wounded soldier for the first time, where I rocked my baby to sleep, where I hand-washed every cloth diaper, where I lit candles each night when my husband was away. They didn't just take a house, they took my past. But there was still one thing: they couldn't touch the truth. And this time, I wasn't keeping it to myself. I was going to rewrite this story, not with tears, but with voice, with law, with my presence in the right place at the right time. And no one would be allowed to erase me from the ending again. I had waited for this moment, not for revenge, but to say clearly from now on, no one tells my story for me. The wedding went exactly how every other perfect family event had gone. Lights set to the right glow, the setting arranged to look effortless, and everyone playing their roles, charm and gracious fake. I sat quietly in the back row, always that same seat, the last one. My hand brushed over the envelope in my purse. I didn't plan to use it, unless they crossed the line. Then Abigail took the microphone. She smiled, looked around the room, and said, "Today is about gratitude for everyone who helped Mason become the amazing young man he is, especially my mother, Lorraine, who's always done everything for our family. Without her, we wouldn't be here." I didn't react. I simply stood and walked toward the stage. No one invited me. No one stopped me. They didn't see it coming. I stepped up to the microphone, adjusted my voice. Every eye turned toward me, surprised, uncomfortable, curious. I pulled a photo from my jacket pocket, an old one, the ancestral home, the day Ethan turned 10. I was holding him on my shoulders. We stood on the porch. The brick path still looked new. Above us, the porch light glowed, and the only person in that photo still standing today was me. I held the photo up. This is my home, where I lived, where I worked, where I raised a child into a man, where every minute of my life is carved into every single brick. I set the photo down, pulled out a document, a copy of the property deed. It had my name, it had a signature, but it wasn't mine. I didn't sign this transfer. And the person behind the forgery is sitting at the head table right now. I paused, let it hang in the air. No one moved. Then I hit play. Lorraine's voice rang out clear and cold. Take down that photo. Shred the paper saying Amelie didn't sign. Just say I handled it to save time. I handed a flash drive to the AV tech. Up on the screen appeared an email. Subject line paperwork, done leave it under mom's name. From Lorraine to Abigail. Below that, a legal statement from Mr. Harris, my attorney. The documents were forged. The current ownership was illegal. The case had been reopened. No one said a word. Lorraine's face turned white. Abigail froze. Ethan lowered his head. He couldn't even look at me. I didn't want their apology. I wasn't standing there for regret. I stood there because I needed every single person in that room to know I still exist, and I won't let anyone redefine my story ever again. A man stood up in the crowd, silver hair, wearing an old nurse's uniform. I can confirm that's Amelie. She saved my life on the front lines in 1989. No one has the right to erase her from any family. Applause started from the back corner. One person, then another, then nearly the entire room. I was stunned, not because they stood, but because I had already stood first. For the first time, I didn't retreat from a crowded room. I stepped forward and said everything. The story was no longer in their hands. It had been returned to its rightful owner. I left the wedding in silence. No one saw me off. No one tried to stop me, and I didn't need them to. 3 days later, I filed the lawsuit. No courtesy call to Ethan, no warning, just a direct notice addressed to Lorraine and Abigail with the subject line, forgery, property theft, civil abuse of power. Nicole, my attorney, would represent me. She didn't ask, "Are you sure about this?" She simply said, "It's time they learned what consequences look like." I thought the legal path would be straightforward. But that night, the person I least expected showed up at my door. 3 weeks before the trial, I got a strange text, "I need to speak with you. Alone." No one can know, the sender Abigail. I didn't reply. But that night at exactly 9 p.m., she stood outside my door. No makeup, no designer purse, none of that usual defiant stare, just a drained face and hands clasped together like she was holding herself together. I opened the door. Didn't invite her in, but I didn't shut it either. She looked at me straight to the point. "I have something you want, but I need your protection in court." I said nothing. She pulled a small USB drive from her coat pocket, set it on the table. "It's a recording. My mother, she's been threatening me for years. I didn't touch it." "Why now?" She took a shaky breath. "If I didn't comply," she said, "she'd cut off all trust fund money, pull Mason's tuition, and she threatened to expose that I had an abortion at 19. Ethan doesn't know." I stayed silent. She looked up, eyes red, but not avoiding mine. "I never meant to take your house. I never touched those papers. I just I was too afraid to go against her. For the first time, I saw something in her face, not apology, but admission. A woman not asking to be forgiven, just asking to be freed. I didn't say I believed her. I didn't hug her. I simply picked up the USB. If there's truth in this, it will speak for itself. She nodded, eyes locked on mine. "I don't need to be forgiven. But if Mason ever asks, please don't let him only see me as the villain." I didn't promise. I only said, "Then testify. Speak the truth. For your son, not for me." She turned and walked away, no more tears, and in that moment I realized I wasn't the only one Lorraine had controlled. The difference was I stood up. I had more evidence, but also a new question: does truth always lead to justice? Within 2 weeks, the other side responded. Lorraine hired a high-powered legal team, gray suits, cold voices like balance sheets. They tried filing a motion to settle, tried to bury the case from the press, but I refused. I wasn't looking for negotiation. I was looking for light. On the first day of trial, Lorraine kept her composure. Sat upright, dark red lipstick, legs crossed like it was a board meeting. Abigail was different. She wouldn't look at me. just whispered constantly to her lawyers rehearsing a new presentation on family happiness. Then it was Ava's turn. She stepped up to the witness stand. Her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed steady. Nicole asked, "Did Mrs. Lorraine ask you to destroy a document confirming Mrs. Amelie hadn't signed?" Ava nodded. "Yes." "Did she say, 'If anyone asks, just say, I handled it to save time'?" Ava took a deep breath. "Yes, and she also said, 'No one's going to believe a stubborn old woman like her anyway.'" The courtroom fell into total silence. The defense tried to strike back. Lorraine's attorneys claimed I was forgetful, emotionally unstable after her husband's death, and incapable of managing a large estate. I stood, presented my medical records proof of full legal competence, and 20 years' worth of tax filings prepared and signed by me alone. Then I said, "I once held American soldiers' lives in these hands, on the battlefield. Don't tell me I'm not capable of holding on to my own home." The jury nodded. Nicole gave her final statement. "This isn't a property dispute, this is systematic theft, and the victim is the mother of those who helped make it happen." It wasn't Ethan's turn to testify, but trust me, he didn't need to, because Abigail beat him to it. In a desperate move, she filed a countersuit against her own husband, claiming Ethan was the one who signed everything, that she only followed his instructions. The courtroom buzzed in disbelief. Ethan was stunned. His eyes darted from his wife to me, and for the first time I didn't see a lost boy. I saw a man betrayed. That same day, he found me outside the courtroom. No begging, no excuses. He just said, "Mom, I didn't know it had gone this far." I looked him in the eye. "No, you just refuse to look. And when you refuse to look, you become part of it." He stayed quiet, then said softly, "If you'll let me, I want to testify. I want to help you get everything back." I didn't hug him, didn't get emotional, just said, "If you really want to help, don't do it for me. Do it for the truth." The trial lasted 3 months. In the end, the ruling came down. The property transfer was declared invalid. Lorraine and Abigail were charged with document forgery. My name, Amelie, was fully reinstated on all ownership records. Ethan was exempt from charges thanks to his voluntary testimony and cooperation. I stepped out of the courthouse into the cold winter sunlight. No press, no photographers, no headlines. Only Nicole whispering, "Congratulations. Everything's been set right." I smiled. Not everything, but at least my name is back where it belongs. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need apologies. I just walked out, not just from court, but from an old life. And this time I carried my name with me. Then I heard a voice behind me. It was Mason. He had left the lights, the wedding, the whole world the adults built for him to live in. He ran up to me, breathless, his hand grabbing mine tight. "Grandma, will you teach me how to heal people like you used to?" I looked into his eyes, still clear enough to see truth. I nodded. "But first you have to learn how to see where the wounds are." A few days later, word started to spread. Abigail was temporarily removed from all family fund responsibilities. Lorraine was summoned again by investigators this time for shady records dating back years. No more silence, no more walls of power to hide behind. Ethan came to visit a week later, no warning. I opened the door. We sat across from each other, no greetings. He asked, "Do you need anything?" "Mom," I answered calmly and clearly, "if you're sincere, go to that charity, sit down, listen to the stories of those kids, then ask yourself, what do you really need?" He said nothing, just nodded, stood up, and left. I thought everything had ended with the verdict. My name restored, the papers corrected, the ones who forged and preached with borrowed reputations silent. I returned home, no celebration, no news turned on, just brewed a pot of tea, sat by the window as the afternoon light streamed in. I thought that was the end. Then a few days later, a small envelope appeared, no postmark, no sender, just a handwritten letter tucked in a plastic sleeve left at my door. The handwriting was slightly crooked, still young but careful. I didn't mean to overhear Grandma, but the recorder turned on, and the truth spoke the rest. Mason. Along with it, a small memory card. I didn't open it right away. I just poured tea into the old cup, then hit play on the audio file. A conversation echoed clear. No drama, no doubt. If you don't make Ethan re-sign that agreement, don't call me your mother. I will, but just this once. Everything you have is because of me, even that boy Mason. I sat still, not shocked, not angry. I just thought about that boy, the only one who didn't have to choose sides, didn't need to defend anyone. He simply saw what was wrong and quietly chose what was right. I didn't send the file to a lawyer, didn't threaten anyone. I just saved it, password protected. Then wrote by hand, Mason, for the day you need to know, not for revenge, just so that if anyone ever tries to rewrite the story, he'll have proof that he saw clearly and stood on the side of truth. I folded the little note and placed it inside an old photo album. For the first time in years, my heart felt light, not because I'd won, but because the one child I believed in chose what was right. I sat down and opened my most recent will. The last line remained unchanged just as I wrote it. That first day, I leave behind no fortune, only the truth. Mason was the only name mentioned, but under one condition he must inherit nothing from his mother's side, not a cent from the trust they built to manipulate his future. If he wants anything, he must choose independence. He must live by real values. And if he does, everything will be his. Not because I love him most, but because he saw me truly. I closed the file, turned off the light. A quiet night, no anger, no regret, just clarity. I don't need an apology. I don't need anyone to love me again. I only need them to know I was there. I was the one who kept the flame alive. And I spoke the truth before they could burn my name out of the story. If it were you in that courtroom, would you choose silence, forgiveness, or would you stand up like Amelie did? Share your thoughts in the comments. Every perspective matters. If this story touched something deep in you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story where truth and courage always find their voice. Thank you for staying until the very end. We'll see you again in another story, maybe about someone you once knew, or maybe about yourself. Take care and stay true.